Once upon a time, in the golden halls of Versailles, where chandeliers glittered like stars and the air smelled of rosewater and ambition, there was a woman who had everything, until she realized she was losing it all. Her name was Madame de Montespan, and she was not just any woman. She was the favorite of King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself. She had given him children, whispered in his ear, and shaped his court with her charm. But power is like sand slipping through fingers, and now his gaze was drifting. A younger woman, Marie-Angélique de Fontanges, with golden curls and the innocent blush of youth, had caught the king's eye. Montespan saw the way Louis looked at her, the way his fingers lingered on her hand, the way he laughed just a little too much in her presence. She would not let it happen. And so, on a moonless night, cloaked and unrecognizable, she stepped into the shadows of Paris. The house of Catherine Montvoisin, known only in whispers as La Voisin, was not grand. It sat hunched between crumbling buildings, its wooden beams darkened by soot. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burnt herbs and melting wax. Jars lined the shelves, some filled with powders, some with bones. When Montespan entered, La Voisin did not look surprised. She never looked surprised. "You come with a heavy heart," the older woman murmured, stirring a thick, bubbling liquid in a blackened pot. Montespan kept her chin high. "I come with a purpose." La Voisin smiled. "Of course." She set the spoon down and wiped her hands on her skirt. "You seek to keep what is yours." Montespan stepped forward. "The king's love is slipping." La Voisin nodded slowly. "Yes, I have seen it." She turned to a small cabinet and withdrew a delicate vial, the liquid inside swirling like ink in water. "A love potion," she explained, "to keep him bound to you." Montespan hesitated. "And if that isn't enough?" La Voisin's smile curled at the edges. "Then," she said, "we remove the obstacle." A silence fell between them. "You mean?" La Voisin's fingers tapped the wooden table. "She is young and fragile. A sudden fever, a slow decline. No one will ask questions." Montespan's heartbeat quickened. She thought of Marie-Angélique's bright eyes, her sweet laughter, the way Louis touched her face. Finally, she reached into her cloak and dropped a heavy pouch of coins on the table. La Voisin picked it up and weighed it in her hands, then smiled. Days later, the court began whispering. Marie-Angélique had fallen gravely ill. Her skin grew pale, her lips dry and cracked, her once lively voice weakened to a whisper. The king himself sat at her bedside, his brow furrowed in worry. "She was healthy just last week," he murmured. The physician shook his head. "Some fevers come suddenly, Your Majesty. There is nothing to be done." Days later, Marie-Angélique de Fontanges was dead, and the king, heartbroken, returned to Montespan's side. She had won. But the dead are silent, and silence can be deceptive. In the dark corners of Paris, La Voisin was not the only one who dealt in poisons. There were others, fortune-tellers, alchemists, and sorcerers, all willing to help the desperate and the ambitious. One of them was Marie Bosse. She had been selling inheritance powders, deadly poisons, to wives who wanted to be widows, and sons who wanted their father's wealth, and she was very good at it. One night, in a dimly lit tavern, Marie Bosse drank too much wine. And then she bragged. "I can make anyone disappear," she slurred to her drinking companions. "The richest women in Versailles pay for my services," she laughed. "Even the king himself is surrounded by my work." A dangerous claim. The words found the wrong ears. By morning, the king's secret police were knocking down her door. The soldiers dragged Marie Bosse into the street, her screams waking the neighbors. "I know nothing," she shrieked, kicking, clawing, twisting in their grasp. "You have no proof." A soldier grabbed her by the hair and yanked her head back. "You spoke too much, witch." Marie spat at him. But when they threw her in a cold, dark cell, her bravado began to crumble. And when the torture began, the names came spilling out. She spoke of the black masses, where noble women lay upon naked altars, where priests whispered dark prayers over their bodies. She spoke of poisoned chalices, enchanted powders, and deadly potions. She spoke of La Voisin, and then she spoke of Madame de Montespan. The Bastille's walls were thick with damp. Chains rattled as La Voisin sat before the interrogator, her wrists bruised. "You performed dark rituals," the man said. La Voisin smiled. "Of course. You sold poisons. I provided what people needed. You served Madame de Montespan." Silence. Then a slow, knowing smile. "I served many powerful women." The interrogator leaned forward. "Did she pay for poison?" La Voisin tilted her head. "Oh, my dear," she murmured. "She paid for so much more than that." When King Louis XIV heard the accusations, he was horrified. The woman he had loved, the mother of his children, had she truly done these things? He did not want to know. The trial stopped. The interrogation ceased. La Voisin was burned at the stake, her screams rising into the night. More than 36 people were executed. Hundreds were arrested, tortured, or exiled. But Montespan, she was never charged, never questioned. Instead, she was simply pushed aside. No disgrace, no public punishment. But the king never truly forgave her. She lived out the rest of her days watching younger women take her place. And though she was never officially accused, everyone knew. She had won once, but in the end, she had lost everything. The affair of the poisons had ended, or so they said. The Sun King ruled for many more years, but he never again trusted the women who whispered in the dark. And if you ever find yourself in a court of power, standing in the glow of candlelight, be careful whose wine you drink, for poison leaves no trace. Good night, and beware the promises of those who deal in shadows.